All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got to talk Detroit because this team's making the playoffs. All right, I see on the Athletic they have a 39% chance to make the playoffs right now. 8-5, they're technically on the outside looking in. My theory is the Lions get in over the Chicago Bears as long as they win that Week 18 matchup. To be honest with you, I don't even know if that Week 18 matchup is going to be. But this isn't an anti-Bears video. This is a Lions video. At the end of the day, they are the number one scoring offense in the NFL. And it really does suck what's going on in the tight end room. Sam Laporta's done for the season. I believe Brock Wright's done for the season, or he's at least on the IR. I mean, the list goes on. The secondary room, whether we're talking about Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, the list goes on. Terrion Arnold, list keeps going on. It sucks, but nobody cares. That's the unfortunate reality is nobody cares. It's in the past, and now you got to look to the future. So Calvin Shepard's got to do his coaching. Dan Campbell, John Morton, they got to do their coaching. They got to try and, hide their flaws or try to get the most out of the talent that they've got. And it sucks. It sucks. But Detroit's getting into the playoffs. And when they do, you don't want to play them. You guys know I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. I don't want to play the Detroit Lions. I don't care if they've won both their games this season. This Lions offense, it's still very damn good. So that win over Dallas was huge, and we talked about it right before, and it was for the season. I mean, it quite literally was for the season. And so that's kind of my whole ethos that we've been talking about in our Lions videos in the last week or so is when Detroit's backs up against the wall, you tend to see the best football. Right, even week one, losing to Green Bay in Lambeau, it's kind of embarrassed. What happens in game two? They come out, they put up over 40 points, break offensive franchise records and destroy the Chicago Bears. I just think when this team was crafted, when this team was built back in like 2022, or you start looking around that time frame, when this team is the underdog, when this team is being underlooked, when they are being forgotten about, that's when you see a really good brand of Detroit Lion football. And so if they lost on Thursday to Dallas, which by the way, I think the Lions will actually win over the Rams on Sunday. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. They've got a week and a half of prep, a week and a half of rest. If they lost to Dallas, your playoff odds drop to literally 12%. So Detroit pulls off the win, and they play for one of the... So here's the thing, it's not like that was the first time this season the Detroit Lions looked like the Detroit Lions. It's just been this very inconsistent brand of football this season. So you saw complementary football, offense, defense, special teams. You saw the takeaways. We finally saw some takeaways. Detroit still middle of the pack with taking the ball away on defense. When Dallas came down the field and they scored a couple of touchdowns, so did Detroit. Detroit went right back down the field and scored some touchdowns. So that was the first time in a while, maybe since the Washington win or even the Tampa win, I'm looking at the schedule, that was the first time this team looked like this team. So that's a big reason why I still have hope. And you even look at history, over the last 4 seasons, the Detroit Lions ranked 4th in December winning percentage at 7-1-4. And just to make it a little bit better, if the Lions beat Los Angeles on Sunday, their playoff odds jumped from 39 to 60. So folks, before we get any further into this video, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, hit that sub button. I apologize, man. We used to post like 3 Lions videos every single week. I come out, I make a Lions channel, very inconsistent on it, and it also resulted in less Lions videos on this channel this season. So I apologize for that. But we're back to posting about 2 or 3 Lions videos every single week. So thank you. Love you guys as always. One thing this offense, you notice, is it feels almost like they're rushing. I watched Jared Goff, I watched this offense, and it feels like they're rushing, all right? They're not running, they're rushing. And you want to be quick, you want to be fast, but you don't want to rush, all right? And I saw this quote, this article from The Athletic, I think it was Colton Pouncey that brought up this stat here. Here's the stat. In 2025, the Detroit Lions have allowed an average of just 2.48 seconds before pressure reaches the quarterback, all right? That's the quickest in the NFL. So in other words, Jared Goff has faced faster pressure than any other quarterback this season. For some comparisons, in 2024, their time to pressure mark was 2.74. That was the 12th slowest in the league. So Jared Goff has had less time to work, and he's had to run this offense with a kind of leaky offensive line. Now, Christian Mahogany, I saw just his practice window just opened, or he just returned to practice. But even though that stat is not good, Jared Goff is tied for second in the NFL in passing touchdowns at 26. He's tied for second in completion percent at 70.1. He's third in pass rating at 110.2, fourth in EPA per dropback. He's thrown for 3,300 yards, which is fifth. He owns the second lowest interception rate at 1.2%. Yeah, we mentioned it. Detroit's putting up 30.3 points per game. That's number one in the entire NFL. They're first in yards per play. The Ben Johnson versus John Morton / Dan Campbell offense, it looks a little bit different, but they're averaging 6.2 yards per play. That's number one in the NFL. They don't turn the ball over. They're second in turnovers, in the good kind. They're fifth in passing. They're fifth in rushing. They're second in touchdowns. Like, this offense still has a lot of pop. You look at Jameson Williams, people are really annoyed at Jameson Williams. I'm not talking Lions fans, because it's mostly sports bettors and fantasy football guys that just don't like Jameson Williams. It's high highs, it's low lows. They just don't like that word, the velocity of it, I guess. But JMO's first in yards after catch per reception. He's second in receiving average at 18. He's second in 25 plus yard receptions at 11. He's second in touchdowns of over 20 yards with 5. He's still been good. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I know he's had some drops. It's been kind of a weird season for Amon, but he's still tied for second in receiving touchdowns. He's fourth in receptions and yards after catch yards. He's fifth in receiving yards. He's tied for fifth in receiving first downs. I know there's no Laporta, but Jahmyr Gibbs is having a great season. We're seeing a little bit more Isaac T. Slaw. So looking down the line, here's the deal. All right, the Lions' divisional odds sit at just 6%. Now, if you win out, it goes up to 54. My Packers have a really difficult schedule. I think Chicago's also got a really difficult schedule. I think Chicago wins one more game this season on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns, and then it's just lost to Green Bay, San Fran, and Detroit. So here's the deal. At 3-1 in the next 4 games, you pretty much lock up a playoff spot, all right? If you go 3-1 with a loss to the Rams, you have a 95% chance to make the playoffs. If you go 3-1 with a loss to the Steelers, you have a 98% chance to make the playoffs. 3-1 with a loss to the Vikings, 96% chance to make the playoffs. And then finally, if you go 3-1 with a loss to the Chicago Bears, you'll have a 75% chance to the playoffs. Now, most people's thinking here is, okay, well, the Rams are going to win and then the Lions are going to win out. If that's the case, like we just said, 75% chance to make the playoffs. But again, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, the meat and potatoes of it, I think Chicago loses San Fran, Green Bay, and Detroit. Only one win against Cleveland. That would bring their final record to 10-7. So even if, they go 10-7 in that situation, even if Detroit loses tomorrow or Sunday against Los Angeles, I'm like confusing myself, then they go 11-6. So you go 3-1 and essentially you should be into the playoffs. So like I said earlier, I do think the Lions will win on Sunday against Los Angeles. But folks, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Got to get to dinner. Thank you for watching. Hit that like button, hit that sub button. You guys know the deal. But most importantly, let me know down below, are the Lions making the playoffs? Yes or no? Peace.